got my signature mug pen.
You got it?
So Isaac Waltley, Soil Conservation.
Yeah. Are we ready? I hereby call the meeting of the Norwood City Council to order. Please rise for the prayer and pledge of allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chamber, we pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Botsall.
Here.
Mr. Gabbard.
Here.
Mr. Geraci.
Here, ma'am.
Mr. Kelch.
Here.
Mr. DiNardo.
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Braden.
Here.
All members present. Moving on to item E, amendment of agenda. Just to be clear, we do have the minutes now for the March 10th, 2020 as well. And item K, we have three ordinances to introduce tonight. We're going to move item 3 to the beginning. And also, you do have the, that amendment was rewritten, so everyone has a copy of that. And that's all the amendments to the agenda I have. May I have a motion to accept the amendments? Mr. Bonzel.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel, second by Mr. Geraci. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Botsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
Moving on to item F1, minutes of the March 10th, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion to accept the minutes? Mr. DiNardo?
Please accept the minutes.
Motion by Mr. DiNardo to accept the March 10th, 2020 minutes. May I have a second? Mr. Braden? Second by Mr. Braden. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Botsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Moving on to item F2, minutes of the March 24th, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion to accept the minutes? Motion by Mr. DiNardo. May I have a second? Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Botsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Item F3, minutes from the April 15th, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion to accept the minutes? Motion by Mr. Thompson.
Move to accept the minutes.
To accept the minutes. Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Botsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Item G, we do not have any request to address council on agenda items. That moves us to item H, reports of standing committees of council. We have a report from the Finance, Budget, and Audit Committee report. Mr. DiNardo.
Yep. So on May 6th, just a few days ago, we as a Finance Committee went through, I guess, 4 major topics. The first is we invited our treasurer, Tim Maloney, to give a review of revenue projections, and we had a discussion basically on the impact that those might have on our city's budget. So the treasurer provided that guidance to the overall budget estimate. He and our auditor, Jim Stith, went through the considerations that we should be thinking about heading into the second half of the year, and provided some expectations. I wouldn't go so far as to say real projections, but it was kind of a great conversation of us asking ourselves and thinking through what is the worst case scenario that could maybe be hitting us when it pertains to our budget. And although it's dangerous to hold ourselves to a number, he did allow us to be thinking about a 5%, reduction in revenue over the year. To put that in perspective, Cincinnati and other Hamilton County cities are rumbling around 20%. So in some ways, COVID-19, we should be feeling a little bit cautiously optimistic. On the other hand, there's a lot that hasn't come in yet. We're going to know more in July, things like our hotel taxes, some of the impact that might be deferred a quarter will start to fall into place. So that cautious optimism is really because there's a little bit of a question mark still, that the next couple months really have to kind of see what this is going to look like. So those are the type of things we went through, but yeah, at the moment we're kind of sticking to the plan, but having that cautious optimism. And a little later, we'll talk through one specific area that we might want to at least make sure that this council is thinking through. After the kind of review of revenue projections, we as a finance committee went through what I'm going to call a skeleton review. And this was of our current bid process and any potential thresholds for purchase approval. We discussed recommended requirements, exceptions to those requirements, and as I said, skeletoned out, which we basically I put on a piece of paper what will likely be the process for competitive bids in our city. And this was all in preparation for what we know is going to come today. President Miracle is probably going to assign us as a finance committee a formal competitive bid process and some underlying features. So we were just kind of getting ready for that, and I think we did a good job in setting some of those first set of rules. After that, we considered an agenda item titled Norwood City's Ability to Fund, Administer, and Evaluate Potential Small Business Startup Loans. And then I added, due to COVID-19 financial pressure, but it was worth noting that when certain council members brought this forward, they weren't just meeting for COVID-19 financial pressure, but any small businesses or startups that we wanted to support. And specifically, they wanted to do that via a loan. We kind of talked about how that had a lot of challenges with it. One of the bigger ones was the fact that we're under fiscal emergency and kind of handcuffed in a lot of ways, even if we wanted to. The second was the city isn't really a bank, and so there are regulatory items we'd have to be thinking through if we wanted to do that. But not only was it a good idea, it did allow us to expand a little bit and talk to Mr. Kelsch and Mr. Dracy about some grant opportunities or non-lending or kind of grants with non-interest-based elements to it. So it was still a pretty good discussion. I think they walked away with some other routes they might want to take for that. But it was cool that they're thinking through that. Then we did a very quick kind of prep session on the financial planning review that we want to take place in the third quarter of 2020. This is just to kind of make good on a commitment we as a committee made to review all the first quarter assumptions that went into making the budget, see how we're doing in the third quarter, and make sure we're on track and we can start to tweak and adjust, particularly for the administration and some of the big three department heads. Lastly, it was recommended that the administration evaluate any hires for mission critical positions. For example, economic development, health commissioner. These seem kind of pretty obvious in our state of crisis. But also was noted to evaluate any potential delays for non-mission critical hires until Norwood's revenue over the next quarter is more clearly understood. So just kind of asking for that evaluation lens as we go through some of the expenditures over the next couple of months. So that was just kind of giving us some time to let's see how some of the chips fall through July. So that was the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo.
Thanks.
May I have a motion to accept? Mr. Tracy.
Make a motion to accept and file.
Motion by Mr. Tracy. May I have a second? Second by Mr. Kelch to accept the Finance, Budget, and Audit Committee report. Any further discussion? Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the Finance Committee for looking at the way that the COVID-19 situation is potentially going to be affecting our budget. I think we can be certain that, or we should be certain that there's no way anybody could ever say that we didn't see an economic downturn coming in this climate that we've got right now. And I think the sooner that we can get some planning in place to cover that potential economic downturn, the better. I appreciate that there's a cautiously optimistic is a 5% loss in revenue, but with all of the areas around us projecting potential 20%, I think it would behoove the Finance Committee and administration to prepare for what that could potentially look like, a 20% reduction in funds. So, but I'm very happy that you're already looking into it, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any further discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the items I think that we noted, that Mr. DiNardo noted, is that the Finance Committee, we talked to both the auditor and the treasurer just about hiring and potentially, their recommendations on, should we potentially slow down hiring for positions that are completely non-essential, especially in departments that are not open right now. And they both said that seemed like a reasonable step. So it was in our report that we had just recommended that we potentially, if it's not already being done, to slow down hiring, especially for areas like recreation, since we don't have a recreation department that really can function at the moment, just with the social distancing guidelines. So just wanted to make sure that was noted. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Item I, third readings of ordinances and resolutions. We don't have any this evening. On to item J, second reading of ordinances and resolutions. J1, ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance 373.01D to adopt the Idaho law as it pertains to the operation of bicycles in the city of Norwood, Ohio. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we have the second reading of this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to have a second reading. Mr. Geraci.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Geraci. Any further discussion?
Was that Gabbard or Geraci?
That was Geraci, second. Please hold it.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. May we please have a second reading?
Ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance 373.01 subsection D to adopt the Idaho law as it pertains to the operations of bicycles in the city of Norwood, Ohio.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Moving on to item K. K1 is the ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to enter into a contract under the Houston-Galveston Area Collective, HGAC, Joint Purchasing Program with 911 Fleet and Fire Equipment for the purchase of a 2021 Seagrave fire engine. Mr. Geraci.
Make a motion to have the first reading, and that's just so that we can get to discussion at least.
Yes, sir. Motion by Mr. Geraci, have the first reading. May I have a second? Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Mr. DiNardo.
Yep. Thanks for that, Matt. So the way to break down this ordinance, I think the law department helped structure this a little bit for us into two pieces. I'm thinking like a purchase authorization or the approval aspect, and then the ability to enter into a debt structure or a financing element. So just on the first one, while it is important to have the first reading now, and it may not be essential to have the second or third, we want to be thinking about that, the ability to finish this if we wanted to move forward by the next meeting. That's basically because we have the quote validity running through June 13th. Maybe that's not that hard to get extended. And we want to get this in front of the commission before the 16th of June. So this allows us to kind of be thinking through this before, or at the second and third reading on May 26th, I think it is. Lastly, you guys might be asking, is this in plan, or I'm sure you already looked. Yes, at around that 660 mark, and the assumptions that went into the rate was, I think, 6%, and we're probably going to get something close to 3%. So that kind of is the first part, the approval piece. The second piece, the debt element, that's what we wanted to separately call out. It's worth noting that there were some questions around the competitive bid process, and does that fit us? Does both the purchase and the debt structure fit within that? This did fall, and we talked about this at the Finance Committee, but for, I guess, the other council members, this did fall outside of the competitive bid rules into something called a joint purchase or cooperative purchase. And actually, it's kind of beneficial for the city in a lot of ways because we get to take advantage of things like reduced fees or waived fees on transportation or favorable maintenance contracts. So that's a perspective to be thinking about, but happy to talk more about it. That's just.
Thank you, Mr. Noda. Mr. Tracy.
I think a lot of my discussion wraps around Chief McCabe. I do have a few questions for him if we can allow him to come up.
Sure. Where would, over here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Chief McCabe, if you would, please.
Could I interject that we really don't want the police and fire chief to have to come to every council meeting? This is an important aspect of what the fire chief does and the police chief. But we really need to respect their career and their professional time and their time with family. So it would be great. I understand we're doing one reading, or you're going to do one reading in that. But if you have questions after this, please call and talk to the chief so that he doesn't feel he has to come to. And I asked him to be here because I do feel this is very important, and I think it's important to hear it directly from the chief. But in the future, if we have questions about the fire, this purchase, please contact the chief during the day. Call him, his cell phone's there, and you guys always have access to the chiefs. But please do contact them so they don't have to come to these meetings all the time. It's really not a good use of their time, and we want to make sure they're not coming to every council meeting. We've seen the fire chief and police chief at a lot of council meetings here lately, well, over the last few years, so we'd like to cut back on that and only bring them in when necessary, like now, absolutely. So, I'm sorry, go ahead. Excuse me.
Mr. Tracy.
I appreciate that, Mayor. So, I understand that the fire department has had a long standing with Seagrave. I know just about every fire truck we've had is Seagrave. Did we look into state bid process to see if we could maybe get something a little less expensive?
So, Norwood Fire Department's had Seagrave fire apparatus since 1950. Mm-hmm. There are two manufacturers in the United States of America that make stainless steel fire truck cabs. Seagrave is one of them. I think if you look at the value and the history of what we've had come through here with Seagrave, is they last. You've got a frontline ladder truck that's almost 25 years old and is still going strong. Needs to be replaced by standard. The reserve engine company, which is out of service now, was almost 30 years old before it lost its pump certification, and it was cost inefficient to fix. In my estimation, it was a poor use of taxpayer dollars because there was no guarantee what we were going to do would actually fix it and its parts. I think when you talk about maintenance and having the same apparatus, the same manufacturer, it makes maintenance on those a lot easier. We deal with one vendor for maintenance to get it done, who are skilled, trained by Seagrave. In terms of safety, I'll put Seagrave up against anybody. And knowing the abuse our trucks take and how good those trucks last, there's a reason for it. To me, that's a cost savings. We spoke at length with the state auditors talking about building a program truck or something that they just build out. It's not to spec. Norwood has a high population density, really tight housing stock. There are certain things that we just can't get on a program pumper that we need. Rear discharge, the third cross lay. And you start adding those things into a program pumper, you're getting to about the same price we're looking at. This is a basic pumper. This is what, it will pretty much match what engine 282 looks like. It's a little bit longer because the one's going to be built is the primary one on the highway, so it gives our guys an easier way to cross over the cab without exiting into traffic. It allows us to store some additional EMS equipment because our engine companies are paramedic staff and carry all the ALS gear. We look, but I'm not interested in an extruded aluminum cab. I don't think that would do well with our roads here and the abuse our trucks take. We're quite comfortable with the relationship we have with Seagrave, and we know what the product is. It's been a fantastic product for the city, and it's money well spent.
You got your favorites, I got my favorites.
Sure, absolutely. All the fire truck manufacturers all have to meet some standard. Mm-hmm. For us, it comes down to who makes a stainless steel cab. There's two. The other one is a company out of New York, and they just don't have a presence here. So you start talking about a different manufacturer and having maintenance issues or warranty issues and getting the trucks back to the factory, that's a problem. Now, Seagraves are built in Clintonville, Wisconsin, so it has to go back to factory, which we've done before. They come down, they load it on a semi and take it back. However, we've had to do that one time in the years we've had our Seagraves. So we worked really hard. The apparatus officer, you guys don't know, this spec has been done for almost 2 years. This was supposed to be purchased last year. The price went up significantly because we got hit with price increases because we just couldn't get it done. Whether it was the previous administration not pushing it through, the state auditors not allowing us to move forward. And there's been a lot of time and effort put into this.
Mr. Thompson. I'm sorry, Mr. Bonzel.
Thank you so much. I'm working on the beard. I'm working on it. No, I appreciate the fire chief being here. Appreciate the ordinance. I would be willing if to do all 3 readings tonight. I know how much time and effort the fire department spends on almost anything they do, but I mean specifically this. I was working with the previous fire chief and Assistant Chief McCabe at the time on with the previous capital improvements plan. There's been a lot of thought that I guess has gone into this, so I'd be willing to approve it tonight. It's in the plan, but I'm fine doing 1 reading as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzel. Mr. Kelch.
I'd like to thank Chief K for coming here. I know the residents definitely appreciate when we can get somebody in here that can speak on these things and has done all the research that he's going to do as chief and knows the equipment and can definitely speak on the specs and the existing equipment. And that would be my question to Chief McCabe is, can you speak on the current equipment we have, some of the maintenance that has gone on with the equipment, costs of that, and how this could possibly be more beneficial for the fire department and the city?
Well, certainly. Right now, what we have in frontline service, we have a 2000 Seagrave engine company. We have a 2009 Seagrave engine company. We have a 1996 Seagrave ladder company. Those are for the fire trucks. We do not have a reserve because I can't utilize what we currently have, which will be most likely placed in the auction to as surplus. We couldn't certify the pump on it this year. We couldn't fix it with for a reasonable amount. So I can tell you this, the 2000 Seagrave, which should be rolled back into reserve status, has already cost this city almost $12,000 in repairs. Between leaf springs in the front brakes, front tires, that's half of my maintenance budget for the fire apparatus in one truck. And it's part of it is because it's getting older. And that truck makes over 2,000 runs a year. It's heavy duty, and it's seen its time. Typically, what we like to do is replace the engine companies within 15 to 18 years and roll them into reserve status. We've had a reliable replacement schedule that unfortunately was never planned for and was never really followed. But we're trying to do that. We're trying to get back into a planning mechanism so the people who are making the decisions with finances have a fundamental understanding of the absolute needs of the department, and we can actually plan those out into a true capital expenditure budget. We're going to be talking about the ladder truck next year. The standards say remove it from service at 25 years since 1996. We're having trouble now. Obviously, that one has a pump on it. We won't be putting a pump on the next one because it doesn't make sense the way we operate. And that's a huge expense, so we'll cut that out. But we can't certify that pump. That truck can't even hold water in it because it pours out of it. We have consistent airline issues with these trucks. We fight it daily. But I gotta tell you, the guys at the firehouse bust their rear end trying to keep these things up to snuff. You drive by there, those trucks look great, but they are maintenance nightmares. And the unfortunate reality for us is we have a mechanic staff down at the garage that are awesome. They do the best they can. The fire trucks now are getting so complicated with the amount of computer technology that are put in them. There's not much they can do for us. We might be able to get them to an emergency vehicle technician class, but that's a lot of money. That'd be something we'd have to look at in terms of what value, what return on investment when we get from sending one of our mechanics to that class, and do we have the capacity to outfit them with the appropriate tools? It may be best to have contract maintenance come out and do that. Last year we spent $7,500 to make sure these trucks are DOT inspected each year. They go through a NFPA inspection to make sure they're roadworthy. And we get that report, we hold on to that to make sure. One of the biggest liabilities a city has is their emergency response equipment on the road making emergency responses. So we are doing everything we possibly can to make sure they are in tip-top shape, that we're doing the best we can to limit the city's liability. And the time's now. We need to really plan, and I appreciate the Finance Committee and the structure. Councilman Bonzall last year with the initial plan with the capital improvements, he actually thought we would ask for a ladder first because of the sheer cost, but we need an engine, and then we need a ladder. And I think we're working towards that. As you see the FRP now, both pieces are in there, and we'll start talking about the 2025 edition next year.
Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. The number you gave with the leaf springs and the brakes and the maintenance, was that, this year?
Just this year.
Just this year.
We have 4 months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Anyone else? Mr. Geraci.
You got to get out of my head here, Chief, because I was just going to ask you if you wouldn't mind looking into what it would cost to send one or two of our maintenance guys to maybe Seagrave to see if they would help certify them under their equipment. And then maybe they can give us an idea of what equipment we might need to service it if we need to. Now, obviously, things that need to be sent back to the factory, that's something that we won't look to do, but minor maintenance stuff that maybe Seagrave can help us out in training some guys to learn
So our previous city mechanic, the late Randy Wheatloff, we sent to Seagrave. This city was hurt by, he was a talented mechanic. That man could fix anything. And he specifically, it's probably one of the reasons why our trucks are in as good a shape as they are now. You know, our maintenance costs have gone up because of him not being there. The two mechanics we have, they're great. They do everything they can for us, but they just don't have the experience in terms of those large diesel motors, the amount of electronics. Yeah, we'll certainly look into that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. Tracy?
Are we, I'll rescind my motion for first reading if we want to have all three readings. I don't know if that's something that we would like to do, is have all three readings tonight and just get this knocked out, but I think this is something that we kind of need to make as our priority right now, is one, for the safety of our residents, and two, our safety, the safety of our guys.
So Mr. Tracy, you want to rescind your motion for first reading?
If the second gets rescinded.
Yeah, I actually think, I appreciate you guys. I know you guys are both saying we could, and I think we all probably would vote yes on the third. It's just, I'm actually thinking of you. There's a lot of times where we do got to push it through quick, and I think we all probably see this as a real easy yes, but we're also not in a hurry. If we can do the first one now and do the second and third on the 26th, I know I'm not going to be here, but I'm sure, you know, if anybody had a problem with voting yes, let's discuss it now. But if we don't, it's going to pass that time. It gives the 2-week opportunity. I think it's probably cool to keep it as is. Are you?
I'm good.
You're good?
Yep.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would suggest we potentially, with that plan, especially knowing that Mr. DiNardo won't be here, to do 2 readings in one night, we'd have to have 6 yeses to do that. So I would suggest that if we do want to have it pass at the end of May, that we do the first and second reading tonight.
Cool. 2 readings tonight?
Yeah, just do 2 readings tonight. That way we'll only need a simple majority.
Thanks.
Or actually, we'll need a simple majority to pass it.
Why don't you modify it to that then?
Mr. Tracy?
That's fine.
Yeah, cool.
I'll modify mine to have 2 readings tonight.
So your motion is to have the first and second reading
Yes.
this evening, and Mr. Nardo, your second is to have the first and second reading. Okay. Any further discussion?
May I add something real quick?
Yes, sir. Chief.
I appreciate that thought. One of the things that I really wanted to do, because I know this was a large capital expenditure for you guys, is to give you an opportunity to discuss this over multiple meetings. I've heard you guys talk about wanting to do things over 3 meetings. We've been working on just this part for you guys since mid-April. So, you know, moving forward, we always try to make sure that we're going to get, I don't like having stuff run down your throat, and I want to make sure you guys are educated on what we're doing. So from a department standpoint, but we're fine with that. We did this knowing that not only did you have this meeting, but the next one, this still has to go through the Finance Recovery Commission. So we want to give you guys plenty of time to consider.
Thank you, Chief. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor by Mr. Geraci, second by Mr. DiNardo, has had the first and second reading of item K1, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to enter into a contract under the Houston-Galveston Area Collective, HGAC, joint purchasing program with 911 Fleet and Fire Equipment for the purchase of 2021 Seagrave Fire Engine. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Mrs. Williams, may we have the first and second reading?
Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to enter into a contract under the Houston-Galveston Area Council Cooperative for Purchasing Program with 911 Fleet and Fire Equipment for the financing and purchase of a 2021 Seagrave Fire Engine and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to enter into a contract under the Houston-Galveston Area Council Cooperative Purchasing Program with 911 Fleet and Fire Equipment for the financing and purchase of a 2021 Seagrave fire engine and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Gabbard.
Oh, disregard, we just got our second read, we're good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gabbard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief McCabe. Moving on to item K2, resolution declaring city personal property to be surplus property and authorizing the disposition of that property consistent with the contract with Hamilton County, Ohio. Mr. Thompson.
I think you need to do K1 first.
I had switched K3 to K1 so the chief could lead.
I understand that, but then moving in order, K1 would be K2 and K2 would be K3.
Oh, I had just moved them.
Oh, you just swapped them?
Yeah, I just swapped them.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I don't care, I just want to
That's
make
what the
sure
motion
what
was.
we're doing.
Yeah, I think the motion was just a swap.
That's fine.
So, may I have a motion? For item K2.
Yeah.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yeah. I have a motion. We have a first reading on this one.
Motion by Mr. DiNardo, have the first reading. May I have a second? Mr. Kelch?
Wait a second.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Mayor Schneider?
This is one that I look at and say, why would you not do, I guess we didn't put an emergency clause on this, right? No. I'll say, there's a ton of this stuff. They've been going through City Hall and finding all of this stuff. It's all set up in lots. We will continue working to get it set up to go on the website. But if you come to City Hall and go into the auditorium area where the mayor's office and the law director's office is, that whole area is filled. And basically, they've been scouring City Hall to find where all this stuff is, and it's tucked in. It's been tucked in every office, every nook, and every cranny. And there is a lot of this. I don't think it's going to be as a profitable surplus auction sale as it was when we sold some properties that was coordinated through your office. But it will clean up City Hall quite a bit. I mean, we've got 1979 copiers still sitting down in the basement. You know, we got stuff in there that needs to go. So, you know, this is just one of those things like, get this stuff out of here. It's a mess. So,
Mr. Kelch?
Well, if I can, through the chair to the mayor, do we know what a lot of these, like vehicles, there's a lot of vehicles in here. Do we know what these are? Are they currently in service? Are they just sitting in like our junkyard area or what?
yes. I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Kelch. If you go to Public Works and drive around the parking lot back there, the actual employee parking lot, there are a ton of junk vehicles sitting there. If you go around the back of Public Works, there's junk vehicles sitting there. These are police cruisers that were wrecked 15 years ago that are sitting in the weeds. These are city cars that the engine blew up and they put them over in the weeds. And then these are computers that have been, they're first-generation computers that the city had that are still, that just got tucked into an office, an unused space. So there's a ton of that. There's some old file cabinets, there's old tables, there's old chairs. You know, when somebody replaced a chair, they didn't just toss it out in the dumpster. They tucked it into a closet back there. So there's 20 chairs. So there's just a ton of stuff like that is really inoperable and not usable for any standard that we have.
Like, I know there's probably a lot of old junk, but there's some cars on here that are like 34,000 miles, says it runs and that. I mean, are these all, or if it's back there, is it all wrecked, or is it just, hey, we don't want it anymore, or?
They're either wrecked cars or old cars, or, yeah, you'd have to go and look at each one of them. They will go on the auction website, the Hamilton County auction website, and you'll be able to look at every one of those. And then there are times, they set up specific times where you can go out and look at the vehicles and really get your eyes on, okay, what am I looking at here? So you know, if it had low miles on it, maybe it was something that our mechanics said, well, let's keep it around for a while because maybe we can use some parts off of it. But after a while, it's just time to clean up. So.
Any further discussion? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, I just wanted to note too, the good thing about this is that, again, it's a public auction, so if there are low mileage cars that, you know, old cars that the city just doesn't need or doesn't have a use for. You can't really convert some of these things into a police cruiser, you know. So, but long story short, I'll just say that the good thing is that then hopefully they'll go for more dollars, and the city will receive more money for them. So I am glad that we're finally getting rid of it. It seems like half the cars in City Hall parking lot are surplus, police confiscations or other things. So this is good that we're at least starting this process.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Anyone else? The motion by Mr. DiNardo, second by Mr. Kelch. Item K2, resolution declaring city personal property to be surplus property and authorizing the disposition of that property consistent with the contract with Hamilton County, Ohio. Please call the roll.
Is this for first reading? All three readings?
Yes, first reading was the motion.
Okay. Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Tracy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
All members present, voting aye. May we have the first reading, Mrs. Williams?
Resolution declaring city personal property to be surplus property and authorizing the disposition of that property consistent with the contract with Hamilton County, Ohio.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Moving on to item K3, an ordinance codifying section 549.02 of the Norwood Codified Ordinance prohibiting throwing or shooting missiles and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
I recommend we have all three readings of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Motion by Mr. Thompson to have all three readings. Suspend the rules and have all three readings. May I have a second? Mr. Braden?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? I'll start with you, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. So can we have is anybody in here can elaborate on this ordinance?
Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. President. Was it last year or the year before, the state of Ohio passed a law favoring gun rights? And part of that was that if a city did anything to interfere with anybody's gun rights, then they could be sued civilly. And that would include attorney's fees and all the rest of it that goes through that. And the way the language was written, it was kind of asking for trouble for the city to have, if we were going to arrest somebody for having a weapon under a disability or discharge of a firearm, and if there was any problem with the prosecution of that under city law, the city would then could be civilly liable, could be sued by the person that the police arrested. So our recommendation is let's just get rid of the firearms chapter. All the gun stuff is covered under state law anyway. And so if if somebody's doing something wrong with a gun, we'll charge them, we'll file the charges downtown. There was one section in there that for the most part doesn't deal with weapons. It dealt with basically arrows. It's the missiles. And the law department was contacted, I think 2-3 weeks ago by a police officer because somebody is having archery practice in the parks, in one of the parks. And he wanted to know, is that okay? Can we do that? And we thought, let's put that section back in the code because this covers non-firearm missiles that could conceivably cause some problems. So it's up to council as to whether they want to put that back in. We wanted to put that in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
So much.
Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you so much. So, reading the ordinance, it says that, it cannot be fired or these things cannot happen in a public place or on private property that is being shot into a public property or somebody else's property, just if it's not your own. So my concern is the Shea Stadium is a public property, and we have a missile that gets, I think, launched, or a rocket that gets launched every July 4th. So I'd like to just make sure, it seems to me, I don't know if there's exceptions for that in there, and I'd like just to get your opinion on that.
Mr. Moore?
Specifically on that, I can tell you, this is exactly the text that was on the books for, I don't know how many decades before we repealed the chapter. So whatever law was in effect 2 years ago, whatever the restrictions were 2 years ago on firing missiles or T-shirt cannons or whatever it is at Shea Stadium, would have the same effect that under this that it did then.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you. I still don't quite know. I mean, I understand that it was there before and it was never an issue, and I'm not saying that it's going to be an issue in the future, but I still feel like it could be ambiguous about whether it is allowed or not allowed, just based on the reading that I had of it. I just want to be clear if I'm off on that, or are you saying that basically that you don't see ambiguity there and that?
I don't see a lot of ambiguity. It's no person shall shoot or propel or throw an arrow, missile, pellet, or other similar substance capable of causing physical harm to persons or property. So I don't see where there's necessarily any concern. The idea is the police are going to charge somebody if they have an arrow or if they have a bow and arrow or a crossbow kind of thing, a pellet gun. That's the kind of thing this would apply to and would be intended to apply to. And I don't think the police are going to change their enforcement approach in any way. But if council, if you want to put it in committee to consider, some of the ramifications of that and maybe put in some other language, some exception language, or explore what other exceptions may apply, then, based on other law, then by all means, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing some kind of, at least only doing a first reading tonight or potentially looking at committee to, like I said, look for some of those exceptions. I'm sure that it probably wouldn't be an issue, but there could be other unintended consequences of this, in my opinion, and I personally would like another 2 weeks to consider that.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Kelch?
Oh, yeah, this is one on there that was a little weird to me. I think it seems a little facetious a little bit. I mean, do we have a huge problem with anybody running around like with slingshots or bottle rockets or bow and arrows right now? Is this like something that's been like increasing, or is this just something, hey, might as well throw this back in? Because I think it, in my opinion, is coming out of nowhere.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Mr. Thompson?
Would Mr. Moore like to respond?
Yeah.
Mr. Moore?
Again, this came about because we were contacted by the police department because somebody was firing bows in one of the parks.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. DiNardo?
It's for the law director. It seems like it wouldn't be a problem, or potentially this is just a matter of enforcement, you can tell me, for someone to be like shooting a bow and arrow in their backyard against a target. Would this be covered by that, or was that not a problem before and wouldn't be a problem tomorrow? Is that what you mean? Because it seemed like the public part was the issue we were all kind of talking about.
If it stays in your backyard, I don't think that's covered under this, but if you miss and go over the fence, then you have a problem. But you'd have a problem shooting an arrow over your neighbor's fence anyway.
That's what I was kind of getting at.
But this would make a criminal aspect of that.
Thanks for explaining. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just curious, I guess, if just the mayor might have some comments on this or thoughts.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall, Councilman. I bow hunted for a few years, and quite frankly, with the compound bow I was shooting with the broadhead, and that's what I think we're looking at, is a person who potentially is a bow hunter, a deer hunter who's a bow hunter. They are powerful weapons, and if you miss the bale of hay or whatever you've set up in a park and it goes flying through, it'll go a long distance, and it's built to do a lot of damage. And that's really, I think, what this police officer was bringing to the forefront is, if there's somebody that just wants to be out there practicing bow, we're not talking about a 10-year-old child shooting a bow. We're talking about adults that can shoot a compound bow that will kill a person if they're on the other side of the woods. So that's really what this comes down to. I would recommend putting this into committee and maybe redefining it a little bit more. I know that Councilman Braden always shoots the Estes rocket off and when we launch the fireworks every year, and I know that the Cub Scouts have used parks to launch the Estes rockets, which they make and do that, and they've used those for years, and the police have never enforced that. But I really think this is more what the law director and assistant law director are bringing about is the potential for somebody who is using one of the parks, one of our public places, to really target practice for something that could be lethal to a child who's on a soccer field pretty darn far away. So that's really, I think, what this is more about. And if you want to put it into a committee, that would probably be the place to do it, and then discuss it a little more, and then come out with something that is more defined to what, because like the law director said, this is old language that was in there for years, and maybe it's time to sort of update it. I'm sure Mr. Gary would have plenty to say about how to update it and make it better, so.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Any further discussion? Mr. Thompson.
I'd be willing to revise my motion to have all 3 readings and to putting this into a Law and Ordinance Committee for further review.
Mr. Brady, you second that motion. Do you rescind your?
I will, yes.
Okay. So your motion, Mr. Thompson, is to
Place it
remove this?
into Law and Ordinance Committee.
Okay. We have to remove this from the agenda, correct?
No? It's, I can stay on the agenda.
Just stay on here?
Yeah, we can just vote to approve that motion.
Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Gabbard?
I'm just glad that we're not having problems with like surface-to-air missiles or something like that. Well, maybe we having some new people move in the neighborhood. I would like to ask that the clerk make sure that when somebody gives you an ordinance, that they fill one of these out stating, you know, who's requesting this ordinance and a little bit about it, just so we know who to call and ask questions of.
Sure, what is that form called? I know
Well, it's right now it's attached to the one that the mayor did with the bikes. So it's that bigger form, but it's an ordinance. It's for
Ordinance request
ordinances,
form.
resolutions, appeals, amendments, and then it's a little form that they fill out. That way, we just kind of know who we can get information from about that particular ordinance before the meeting.
I know that Mrs. Velez has shared with me that sometimes she gets those and I think she tries to track them down, do a little CSI. And
I don't think that she always gets them, I think, is the issue.
Yeah, that's correct.
Otherwise, they don't go on, period.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Anyone else? Okay, great. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye to remove item K2 into the Law, Ordinance, and Human Resources Committee. Thank you. Moving on to item L, Administrative Reports. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There's quite a bit to go through, and I'll go through it quickly. If you want to keep a pencil handy so that with your questions you can hit me with them at the end. I know I was told brevity is the key word today. Somebody said be brief. COVID-19, there's a Pastors Alliance, and they are working on opening up the churches. You know, of course, the government never shut down the churches. The churches took it upon themselves to protect their parishioners and their congregations. They are planning to open up at the end of the month, May 30th. And they have been working with the health department, and they've came up with some guidelines that they feel they can put in place to open up safely. So I'm really pleased that that Norwood has a faith community, and these pastors are getting together and they're talking about how to do it safely. It really is it was enlightening to talk to Pastor Chuck Smith about some of the things that they're trying to make happen. They want people back in church, and they want that socialization, and those groups are important to our community. Opening up restaurants, I've had a couple of discussions with different people. We've talked about it with the building department and with the law department, and how we can potentially help with, maybe some modifications that make it, that will help them open up and continue with the social distancing. I know that all of the owners, the restaurant owners are chomping at the bit to get their restaurants and their businesses back open, but they also realize that they've got to try to protect not only the people that they're serving, but their staff. So they are looking at different ways to do that, and looking at the challenge of getting opened back up as quickly as possible. And I will tell you, from the city's standpoint, we will work with them as much as we can in every way that we can to help them get open back up in a safe and responsible manner. So that's a very important part of it. The health department's been involved. The building department's looking at it a little bit. We are looking at some modification plans and what they bring to us as plans, and how we can maybe work together, cooperatively to help them get open back up. So those are important parts of it. City Hall, we are working on getting City Hall open back up. We had hoped to be open back up to the public for a period of hours in the middle of this month, but that's going to wait until a little bit longer. We are putting some partitions up between people that we will be servicing and the staff, and trying to protect our staff and trying to protect the citizens that come into City Hall. We are doing a lot of decontamination, a lot of cleanup in City Hall every day. It seems like every hour we're doing all the same things that you're doing at your businesses and at where you work. So that's an important part of it. But getting those barriers up in place, they probably should have been up in place maybe a few years ago, just to protect our people and to put that. But we're working on that. And from the mayor's standpoint, there are briefings constantly. It seems like I'm constantly in a Zoom meeting. Either it is a state briefing, or it's the Ohio Municipal League, the Mayor's Association has briefings, or it's Hamilton County's briefings, and they're going through what basically the city can and can't do. They're talking about protective gear, and what our Hamilton County Emergency Management Agency is doing. They are talking about, Hamilton County's health department on how they're opening or trying to set up and open things. Today they talked about a COVID-19 reporting. They set up basically a separate page where you can report if you have COVID-19 concerns as a citizen. So as we open back up, we're going to have to look at that stuff. I know that all the bars would like to be opened up yesterday, but the bars are probably going to be one of the hardest ones to get opened properly, because of course, if you are drinking, you loosen up a little bit, right? You go to a bar to loosen up a little bit. Well, when you loosen up, you sort of forget about social distancing and certain things. So there are going to be some real challenges with that aspect of it also. So this is not going to be, it's not going to be easy getting it opened up. We really just need to plan, and the restaurant owners and like the churches, putting plans in place, and then the city working with them to make sure that things happen. Again, we are 100% for opening things back up and getting business back to normal and some normalcy in our lives. But we also have to do it in a cautious and a planned and an effective manner, so that we're not causing more problems than we've already had. So for the city of Norwood, we continue our Monday morning Zoom meeting with all the department heads and talk about what they're doing, whether it's the police department or fire department or the health department and public works, and then trying to make sure that we're all coordinating our efforts and helping each other through this. I think that morale at City Hall has been very high through all of this. I think that the employees and the staff have done a great job of really staying positive and trying to do the best job they can. So I really do commend all the extra efforts that they've put forth to make sure that they're protecting each other at this point. So I do want to talk about that. So that's sort of the COVID-19 update. Planning grants, there's a couple of grants that are going on right now that we're working on, or that are being worked on. I shouldn't say we are working on. The city's working a little bit on it. There's a mini planning grant that just went in. This is part of the Norwood Together group in collaboration with the city. It's a mini planning grant that is coming out, that was offered, and we're hoping that will be successful with that. That mini planning grant will be from Montgomery Road, from the South Cork line, so Lawson Way, ultimately, our South Cork line, up through, I think it runs all the way to Smith, and it'll be, I think it's about $40,000, and it'll help us get some engineering studies done and some different things to really sort of plan out what the city would like to see through there. There's also a grant from the Keep Norwood Cool, which is Dana Bull. You guys, she's came and talked to council a few times. She was successful in getting a grant that's it's intervention of and preventing children's environmental exposure. So she's looking at the school playgrounds. This grant looks at the school playgrounds and the environment that our children are in all the time. Actually, we have a high level of exposure or a high level, I think in Hamilton County, it's like 17% of our children end up with asthma and different breathing related issues. So that's something that we would like for some efforts to be put into, and she's done some work there, and I think she's been successful in capturing a grant. That'll be administering that through the health department and working to get that stuff done. There's a couple of other grants. We're working on a grant through, I think, the Season Good Foundation and this has to do with the Norwood lateral. So we'd like to replace more guardrails there. We've replaced a couple of guardrails on the lateral and tried to clean up some areas that had guardrails that were destroyed for years. We are also looking at the lighting and how we can do lighting a little bit better on the lateral, and we're looking for grants for that. We did put money, I thank the Finance Committee for putting money in there to work on the lighting. Of course, once we started digging in deeper, we found out that underground wires are down. There's not just poles down, but there's underground wires that are not attached. So there's like 5 different systems, and out of those 5 systems, you're getting like 3 lights on this system and 4 lights on that system. So there's a lot more to it, and we're looking for grants to try to do that in a more efficient and effective way. So there's a lot that we're working on there, and there's other grants that we're applying for and trying to get going. Street repaving, we've got Indian Mound, of course, and all that area up there it's still on track. They are pushing some of the dates back. We were already sort of late summer for that project anyways. They're pushing some of those dates back, but we're still on track. We still have a commitment to get that done in 2020. The Safety Service Directors went out and started communicating with the residents that have trees that are potentially, a large tree that's sitting in the Devil Strip, so the curb and the sidewalk, and if there's a large tree sitting in that area, we're looking at some of those that are going to have to be removed. You can actually drive up and down the street and see them because they've raised the sidewalk and they've destroyed the curb. Well, you can't repair the curb and cut under the tree and do all this stuff without damaging potentially the tree. Most of the ones that I've seen, I drove through and looked at it, and most of the ones that have to be removed, the residents who live there will probably be thanking us for removing that tree. But there are a few trees that I look at and say, that might be somebody's grandma planted that or grandpa, and that causes problems. But we're going down that route, and we'll take care of that stuff as we move along. Again, late summer. Montgomery Road bus humps, we've got quite a few calls about the bus humps, right? So that's at the curb where the bus is pulled over, and now it's a mess. Years past, when we had the milling machine in here, we've asked them to go down and grind those back off and clean that back up. I don't know that we're going to be able to do that. There are some areas where it's getting so bad that we might have to go out and our public works guys might have to take some areas out and replace them just like they do at water digs and other areas. Or we might contract some of that stuff out. But those things get pretty bad. You guys drive the same streets I do, so not a big deal. The census, you can see the signage right here in front, and each of you received an email from me, and each of you received some census signs, and I'm asking that each of you get those out there. The census is so important to the city of Norwood for a couple of different reasons. Mostly is because that the census determines, it really does determine, the funding for communities like the city of Norwood, the schools, funding for schools. hospitals, roads, all of that funding is sort of based on where everybody lives. I mean, you don't give millions of dollars to a community of 450 people. You give millions of dollars to a community of 20,000 or 25,000 people. We are in that $20,000 range, and we need to make sure that the census, that everybody is counted. So I implore all of you to talk to people, to push to make sure that they are filling out their census information. If you know of a person that maybe has a guardian, make sure that person knows. And I know we have a lot of people that live around the city, live in a one-bedroom apartment, and they have somebody that comes over and helps take care of them. Talk to those people when you see them. If you have, aunts, uncles, relatives, make sure they understand how important it is that we fill out and that we are counted in that census. So we have yard signs available. I think the census ends in August, correct me if I'm wrong, it's right around August. It goes on pretty long. So some people will say, well, I already got a bunch of census stuff and I threw it away. They continue mailing it to you, and they really do want you to fill that stuff out. I really want you to fill that stuff out. So let's get a good count in. If you need a yard sign, you can call me at City Hall or email me at mayor@norwoodohio.gov, and we'll get a yard sign out to you. It is very important. I did hire an executive assistant to the mayor. That's Tom Perry. Tom has a bachelor's degree from Bowling Green State University in political science. He is finishing up his master's degree in public administration at Northern Kentucky University. He's lived in Norwood for many, many years, and he's already proven himself an asset. He really started with the city yesterday on Monday, but he's already hit the ground running. He was working with the Norwood Together group and really doing a lot of his own efforts at home to get up to speed on grants and grant writing. He's done some grant writing. He worked in one of the congressman's office while he was going through school. One year he was in Washington, so he's got a good feel for treating elected officials properly. He's got a great feel. He's already brought some different tools to the mayor's office to help us sort of track telephone calls coming in and try to get more of a feel for the pulse of what's happening. So there's some interesting stuff that Tom has there, and I'll introduce him to all of you guys as we get closer. Quarterly newsletter will be emailed out at the end of this month, the first of the quarterly newsletters, and then we might have a special edition go out. That'll be going out to all the people that have been taking the survey on our Facebook page. We've got a survey, and we're asking for email addresses. Will you accept them? And then we even text. Right now, we're trying to get that email stuff started up. We've got about 175 surveys that were filled out just from that survey on our Facebook page, the Norwood, Ohio Facebook page. And then we've also probably got another 100 email addresses from other areas. So that newsletter will go out, and then we hope that you will share that newsletter with others and that we can build on that. It'll have information on it, like, we'll put together some sort of the calendar of events. There's some information on Public Works and the operations of Public Works. There will be some other information on who to contact at City Hall and what's going on at City Hall. So I think you guys will find the quarterly newsletters to be very beneficial. The website, the UC Capstone team finished up. I know through the COVID-19 stuff, they all had to leave school, but they continue to work. We had a really great sort of wrap-up Zoom meeting with them, and they shared with us their efforts, and that is putting together the website, and so we've got a good foundation for the website. When I say foundation, there's still a lot of work left to do on the website. Each of you, there's a page that has each of the council members' contact information on that, so we will be sending emails out to you. Each of you have a picture on this new website. You might want to send us if you have a great picture, your glamour shot picture that you want used, you need to send it to us so we can get it on there. Councilman Gabbard has said that he will provide some pictures for the city from his level of photography, so we've got to add some pictures like that. There's really going to be a lot of good information on there. There will be a calendar of events, and there will be a tab that you can press on with that calendar to submit events that you want to put on the calendar. So I think the website's going to be very nice once we get to it. If you haven't noticed, driving down Montgomery Road, there's a large banner across Montgomery Road for our Norwood seniors. That was put together by purchased by the Roger Hinkle Fund, and Andy Bolts is the one who sort of coordinated that. And I know there have been some other discussions about how are we going, how do we recognize our graduating seniors? It's a tough year to be a graduate this year, but anything we can do from the city's perspective to make it better and make it more fun and a celebration, we'll definitely be involved in that. If you look at the Fidelity Federal Building on the corner of Montgomery Road and Sherman Avenue, there's a lot of work being done there by Pete Ventura, who's a Norwood guy, born and raised in Norwood. They are doing a lot of work there, opening it up. They've cut some new windows in up top. They've taken out the walk-up. Remember, it used to be a walk-up sort of drive-through window, but it was a walk-up window for the bank. That's been taken out. He is talking to us about what we can do and help him with the sidewalk on the corner there, and what we can do to make sure when he redoes his little area there that we maybe put some in and complement that area and make it a first-class thing. So that's an important project that's going on. The police department, actually, Pete was one of the people that when I talked about painting the police department, he said, are you going to paint it the exact same color, or are you going to do something, make it look nice, implying that it doesn't look nice. So he's actually presented some different color schemes for the police department, and we're still sort of looking at some of those. I think we've got about 8 different color schemes, and we've got to figure out what works there. Montgomery Road streetlights, I know that was something that was something through all of last year. It was like, what's going on with our streetlights? Murphy has made a lot of progress with that. He's been working with Duke Energy, and you'll see there are some new poles actually in place, some new streetlight poles that are in place, and there are many more streetlights that are actually active, working. There's one right at the bus stop there at Speedway that had been out for years that's active now. So he's twisted some arms, he's made some relationships with Duke, he's got some things going there. The decorative streetlights right there along City Hall's block, there's one decorative streetlight right there by Heritage that is going to be replaced here soon, and all of those lamps are being changed over to LED, so hopefully they will all look the same. If you drive down through there, it seems like we replaced one bulb this year and then one bulb 3 years later, and they all sort of have a different look to them. So, and then the clock at Heritage Park right there at City Hall has been repaired. There was a piece broke in there that made it constantly lose time, but that's been repaired. We had to wait a long time because Verdon Clocks was closed for quite a while. Sad to say that we did receive word that the Norwood Hometown Fireworks has been canceled for this year. There's not, that's always been a citizen-led effort, and the funding for that always comes from actually the committee running around and talking to people, and then we had a sort of fundraising coordinator, and she always did a bang-up job trying to bring the money in to the donations, but we will not be having the hometown fireworks this year. I did have a discussion or a call from the head of the Chamber of Commerce talking about the Norwood Day Parade. It is still hanging out there. They have not totally committed to not holding the Norwood Day Parade. I told them I hate to see the parade not go off. It's a tradition in the city. It's an outdoor parade, although we always have a big crowd. I would love to see it still go forward. We'll see what happens there. And then one of the last things I had on here, I think, is the municipal swimming pool, is Waterworks Pool, and what we are doing, because there are a lot of municipalities that have already thrown in the towel, so to speak, and said they are not opening up their municipal pool this year. We have not, from the mayor's office, I have not made that decision yet, and we're going to look at what potentially can happen or can't happen there. Not opening the pool is going to be a tough pill to swallow, but it also, if our season for the pool is so short, and it's going to be a tough decision as we get a little bit closer. So we will see what the end of May brings and what some of June brings to figure out where we go from there. The last thing, I'll end on a high note. My wife, the First Lady, is going to have the First Lady's Summer Concert Series at Victory Park on Wednesday nights. We're going to have entertainment at the gazebo. It'll be an outdoor outdoor thing. Probably our first one will be mid-June, late June, every Wednesday, and we'll have entertainment that is friendly to families, and it'll be just a couple hours, but it'll be a great place to go and have some fun. And then we hope to build on that and see if we can get some stuff going. I know that we had, I think, Mr. Bonzo, Councilman Bonzo, you had Shakespeare in the Park, and we'd like to get some of those events going again. Different events in each of the different parks, because I think this is going to be a year where everybody's outside, which is great. And this would be a great year for the city of Norwood to really revitalize some of the parks and the efforts at the park. So with that being said, you talk about not mission critical positions. A recreation director is somebody who would typically run some of those events. We've got to look at that stuff and figure out how we get these things done without adding the people back that, I do not disagree that we will have some financial challenges with this, and we really need to look closely at our budget the whole time and figure out how we're doing. The summer concert series is not a funded event by the city of Norwood's operating funds. We're not paying $5,000. This isn't Red, White, and Blue Ash. We're not paying $30,000 and having Leonard Skinner come in. We're talking about local bands. We're talking about church groups. We're talking about choirs. We'll probably have some other bands, but this, might be folk music, much like you see. So it'll be small time, but it'll be very entertaining, and it'll be great to see the gazebo reactivated and having some fun up there. So that's all I have. I apologize it was long, but
Thank you for your report.
Brevity.
Mayor Schneider. Any comments or questions? Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you so much. So there's a lot that I would love to respond to, mostly in good ways, but I'll just pick a few things. So that clock at City Hall, it's actually very interesting. I'm glad that that's finally fixed, because I did talk to Pete Ventures when I brought it up to me. I brought it to Director Murphy, and it's 20 minutes fast, and so they tried unplugging it for 20 minutes, and then when they put it back in, the thing reset to 20 minutes ahead. So
it's 20 minutes fast right now?
It was. No, it was. And so anyways, just long story short, it was really funny that it was doing that. So I'm glad it's now fixed. So two things. The one thing I really touch on, the Norwood Day Parade and the pool. So the parade, I think, if truly, I truly do believe that we should very much be evaluated at the, however much ahead of time it needs to be evaluated, but and looked at. But I think potentially we could look at extending the route, so making it longer so people can space out more than they traditionally do. If you're going to do it, but I would just say that, that's the most popular event of the year, and that means that it brings in a ton of people to the route. So just something to be aware of, and I'm sure you all are, but I don't know, it just seems...
Can I interject?
Sure.
The parade is a function of the Chamber of Commerce, not the city. So although we're heavily involved in it, of course, it's the Chamber of Commerce's decision on whether they hold the parade or not. We can definitely say, hey, maybe change the parade route and do that. I think that's a great suggestion, but it is not an administration. It's not
I would argue that it probably is, because somebody has to give the permission to close the streets in order to have the parade happen. So, ultimately, I think it is, even if the administration does put it on, I think it is on the administration to be able, I think they have the chance to say, no, we should not do it this year. But there's time to figure that out. On the pool, I've been told that that we have lifeguards that have already been trained or partially trained. I don't know if do you know if that's true or not?
Yeah, training took place before the COVID-19 stuff took effect, according to, at that time, the person who was doing the training.
Gotcha. And so, anyways, so with that, I think lifeguards, they pay a fee for a lifeguarding class. So if we don't actually open the pool, I do think, or even if we open it for a short period of time, we should look at potentially reimbursing some of that cost that they paid back to them. Or the city of Cincinnati, I was reading an article about this, they said that they're not going to open all of their pools this year, but not necessarily because of COVID-19, it's because they haven't had time to train lifeguards. So potentially, maybe we could partner with them if we don't open up, to let them use our lifeguards, or to let them hire our lifeguards, right, and figure out a way to still keep those people employed that would have worked at our gym, or worked at our pool. And the last thing, Tom Perry, I think the Tom Perry hire, it seems like it's going to be a really great hire because he's the gentleman, I don't know if it was at the very beginning of this council, did he go, yeah. He's the gentleman that came and presented ClearGov to this council, like it was like our first or second meeting. And we were all just like, you know, pretty amazed because he was giving us all this data about spending on police, fire, and various things like that. And so anyways, I think it's a great hire. He's, you know, I've interacted with him over the years at various times, and I think he's going to do a great job. And I did get a chance to talk to him today, and yeah, I think there's just going to be a lot of opportunities to partner, and I think he's going to help make the city, you know, more effective. So it's encouraging.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Yep. Anyone else? Mr. Kelch?
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering if we had any updates in the water department or anything like that. I know you gave an update last time. I'm not sure if there was any news.
Mr. Mayor?
We still have extra help in the water department right now, making sure that all of the reports are and put in accurately, making sure that the telephones are cleared on a regular basis. And that was a big challenge previously, where people were calling in. I think a lot of people were calling in numbers, and at times we were getting a backlog, and then there was a hurry up and get it done. And so I think that they're doing a much better job. There's still work being done on the software system, and there's definitely still some work that needs to be done on clarifications of some policies and procedures. One of the things that I failed to mention in my report was that the law department, the treasurer's office, the auditor's office, and the administration sort of met and went over policies and procedures and putting together a booklet for the city of Norwood. We have Clemens and Nelson working on that for us, and that would encompass, you know, part of putting together policies and procedures for the water department to make sure that we're taking care of that business in the proper way. So, yeah, there's actually a lot of work that's being done in that manner.
Thank you.
Mr. Tracy?
I'm glad you brought up the Montgomery Road grant. I know I discussed that with Mr. Brown about, I don't know, 3-4 months ago or something, back at one of the community council meetings, just because I knew that they may have had slightly better resources than us at the time to utilize or find grants. I'm glad that they've found something to get us some sort of engineering for that project, and hopefully he'll reach out at some point to kind of go over some things, but I know that's been something that at least him and I discussed for a while at that meeting, so I'm glad that this has actually come to fruition finally, and we're starting to see the light.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy.
Mr. Tracy, there is an engagement portion to that grant where they are required within the grant to actually pull community members together, much like you're alluding to. So that is a part of it, and putting sort of your community in on that planning process, and just what you're talking about, sort of the ownership of it, so that once the mini plan comes together, everybody goes, I had my finger in on that one. So you're right, absolutely, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else? Thank you for your report. Moving on to item M, other requests to address council. I don't have any this evening. Item N, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business this evening? Mr. Tracy.
Guess I'll include this on unfinished business. I've been extremely busy over the last 2 weeks, and I apologize to you guys that I haven't called any committee meetings like I said I would. But tonight I'd like to, if possible, see if the housing committee members, Mr. Gabbard, Mr. Bonzel, and Mr. Kelch would be available sometime this week, possibly Thursday or Friday for a meeting.
What day?
I will not be available anytime this week, but go ahead and meet without me.
Huh?
So that I will not be available, I won't be back, but go ahead and meet without me.
Okay.
What day?
Thursday or Friday. He said Mr. Gabbard said he was okay with Thursday.
Sounds good.
What time would you guys like to do it? I'm available all day Thursday. I'm off work, so.
I am too.
Well, I do have a school Zoom meeting during the day, like 6:30.
6:30.
Yeah, if you want to have it that late.
We're gonna go over chronic nuisance. I guess yard sales might be a little late for a yard sale at this point, but we'll go over it and then discuss. I guess some of the auditor's objectives that we need to discuss. Some of the state auditor's objective. So 6:30, I guess, unless you want to do it earlier.
You have anything during the day?
I do have a couple things. Let's see exactly. Free after 3 p.m. Free after 3.
All right. Like at 3:30 or something, 4?
You're free after 3?
Yeah.
3:30 is fine.
You good? All right.
What's the location, Mr. Tracy?
Location will be here.
I was gonna say, I asked that because there's only going to be 3 of you all there, so you probably could use council chambers, and that way the school district doesn't have to open the...
Yeah. We can.
Okay, that's
The
fine.
commission had theirs in there, and they had 4, they spread them out, so.
That's fine. We can do council chambers then. So we'll do a housing committee meeting on Thursday. What is that, the 14th? Yeah, the 14th, and I'll get all that information out tonight to clerk, and have it at 3:30.
Any other unfinished business? Last couple meetings, I've talked about the report on accounting methods, and I had 3 items that I would like to place into Mr. DiNardo's Finance Committee. This is all regarding our purchasing policy. I have them listed as item 12, 14, and 16. The first one, Mr. DiNardo, the city does not have a formal purchasing policy, and purchasing procedures for the city are not documented. Purchasing policy for a city should be developed, adopted by ordinance, and distributed to all departments. That's the first one. The other 2 are regarding the then and now purchase orders. Also,
The blanket
item
purchase.
16 is the
Blanket purchase.
blanket purchase orders. So all 3 of those, since they go together, if you would do that, sir.
Yeah. In an effort to drum up excitement for the next committee meeting, a bit of background, we did talk about the skeleton structure of a competitive bid process already. So we'll be kind of formalizing that and putting that to paper. The then and now purchases is should approve POs and then spend the money, but sometimes expenditures are made and the PO is either sought or put together afterwards. Typically, these are for small dollar amounts, but really it's about putting maybe we put a threshold together in a process to prevent some things from kind of slipping under the rug. And blanket purchases, these are probably setting a time and a dollar figure around a blanket purchase, like a recurring purchase for, I think an example was like salt. You know, if we buy salt every month or something like that for a particular price for a particular period. So those are the things that we just want to put into writing. And then I think, and this is a question back to you, it's really just as soon as possible, not that we're trying to meet a particular thing, right? If we all just get these done, it's one step closer to getting us out of fiscal emergency.
Exactly.
Is that the logic?
Exactly, that's
Yeah.
the logic. And also, bear in mind that we have to present these to the auditor's office for their approval as well.
For the 16th?
No. Just
one.
as we get them done, send them they will review them, approve them, then we can
Nice one, thanks.
vote on the ordinance, check those off, and move on to the next ones.
Cool, man.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardo. And Mr. Dracy, I'm working on one for you, but I'll get back to you on that one. And that's all I had on the unfinished. Anything else? Moving on to item O, new business. Is there any new business this evening? Mr. Gabbard.
Yeah, I'd like to place into the Housing Committee the subject of building department fees and permits.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Yes, sir.
I'd also like to thank the mayor. He mentioned the sign that was put up and to honor the seniors, and which when this idea came, I had Mr. Bolts and Mark and Missy Gabbard come to me and say, hey, do you think that we could get permission for this? I contacted the mayor. I just want to thank the mayor. When I contacted him, I said, hey, there's an idea floating around here. What do you think about it? And he said, yeah, it sounds pretty good. And I came back to him again and said, hey, the idea's kind of changed. And he just immediately said, hey, look, we need to honor the seniors. Whatever it takes, do it. And just get with Public Works, and we'll make it happen. And so I just want to thank the mayor for that. I want to thank Andy Bolts, Mark and Missy Gabbard, the Roger Hinkle Foundation, Slusher Signs, and Public Works. You know, again, just going kind of above and beyond to make sure that they got that up there. And they didn't put a year on it that just says congratulations seniors. That way, hopefully, every year we can just put that up to honor the graduating seniors. And it's not necessarily just for Norwood. You know, anybody that lives in Norwood that has a senior, they might go to Roger Bacon or Purcell or other places, St. X. The thought is that maybe every May 1st, we put that up and it hangs for the month of May. Just the city's way of honoring the graduating seniors. It's a neat gesture. I thank you for I thank the people that took the time and had the idea and put the effort in and sought the funds and put all that together. I think it's an outstanding way of again, showing just community support during a time of crisis, you know, and these poor seniors are missing out on a lot of things that happen during your senior year. So this is just one way that the city can say, hey, congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Anyone else? Mr. Dracy.
Just wanted to note that I've got the building department fees on this meeting for Thursday. Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Also, if I could ask the law committee members, Mr. Bonzel, Mr. Braden, and Mr. Gabbard, if we can set up a possible committee meeting, I guess next week, because I would like Mr. Bonzel to be part of this meeting, since we'll discuss this ordinance that was on the table tonight. I don't want to do it on a day you're not here.
I do appreciate that. So just due to like some pre-scheduled things, like probably the earliest I could meet would be, 25th is Memorial Day, so we should not meet that day. I mean, probably the earliest I could meet, honestly, is the 26th. It's the day of the next council meeting. So if you all want to meet without me and I can send a written statement, I'm happy to do that.
I can't meet before the council meeting because unfortunately I don't know if I'm going to get off at 4 or if I'm going to get off at 6.
It's totally understandable. So, I mean, either you could just meet without me or we just won't have it for the next council meeting. So we could meet like that Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday after that.
That's, we can do it on the 27th. I don't think I have anything really that night.
I'm good.
The only thing I have is class until 7:15, so we can either do it before 4:30, as long as I get out at 5.
I would say just let us know. Yeah, just let us know. I would say just let us know. I'm available any day that week, so anytime.
Okay. Is the week, Mr. Braden, is the week of the 25th 5th or the 29th-ish open for you?
Oh, yeah, we can set the meeting. I can make it.
Okay, I'll send an email out and see what we can get. All right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Anyone else? No further new business? We'll move on to item P, communications. Item P1, letter from the auditor's office. Mrs. Ward.
Letter dated May 1st, 2020, to Norwood City Council. Dear council members, this letter is to let you know that the April monthly financial reports were emailed to each council member on May 1st. If you have not received said email, please let me know so that I can verify your email address and also get you a copy of the reports.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we receive and file this letter.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to receive and file the letter. Mr. Braden.
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Item P2, letter from Mayor Schneider. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated May 4th, 2020, to Mr. Ken Miracle, President, and the members of the Norwood City Council regarding Mayor's Court fines. Dear President and members of Council, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of April 2020. Please note, Mayor's Court sessions were suspended from March 19, 2020 through May 21st of 2020. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that the letter be received and filed.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to receive and file the letter. Mr. Kelch.
Second?
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Item P3, letter to the Board of Education.
Letter dated May 8th, 2020, Mr. Brandon Atwood, President, Norwood Board of Education, regarding donation of Allison Elementary School playground equipment in memory of Lisa Tanner. Thank you and the entire Norwood Board of Education for your generous donation of Allison Elementary School playground equipment in the memory of Lisa Tanner to the City of Norwood. Please know that the playground equipment will be put to good use for the enjoyment of the children of Norwood. Respectfully, Ken Miracle, President of Council, City of Norwood.
May I have a motion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we receive and file the letter and express our appreciation for that donation.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Braden. Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Yeah, I think this is an outstanding idea. My only concern is, and it was brought up to me, I did speak to Mr. Kelch about it, since he's head of playgrounds, is for us to just make sure we check with the law department and with Public Works, just to make sure that when you move equipment like that, that's still insurable.
I'm way ahead of you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Gary has already contacted Mrs. Ronan, and I know they spoke, and
Awesome.
He took care of it.
I think this is a great idea. There's no reason for it just to sit over there, and then also for us to use it and honor Lisa Tanner, who's a friend of mine. It's a great gesture, and it's a way, since she was a teacher and loved the children anyway, what better way to honor her memory is than with some playground equipment the kids can play on. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Kelch.
Yeah, so to go a little further into the playground equipment stuff, so we did look at that, and we need to get new hardware to move the equipment. So what we're doing currently is trying to match up that playground set with, we were able to find a sticker for the original company that was bought from, and we're looking into, can we replace the hardware? There's a slide needs replaced, and then some of the stairs leading up when you first try to get onto the play set. So there's a lot of moving parts there to make it work. And one of them is the park project I have in mind that I'm going to be bringing to the Parks Committee for this park equipment and the whole start of this, acquiring this equipment, can it fit there safely? Because it has to be so many feet away from fencing and that kind of thing to actually fit in the park. So, and there's a lot of moving parts there. If we can find the hardware, can we get it out of the ground and get the concrete off of the pillars without damaging the pillars? Which, talking to Clint at Public Works, is going to be pretty tough, but it's something we're going to try to do very gently to make happen. And if it can't go to that park, looking at other sites where it can probably go so it can be utilized. It was a great partnership, in my opinion, with us as the city and the schools to utilize a piece of equipment that has otherwise been going unused for quite some time. So I just wanted to add that little bit of information.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Item Q, excuse all absent members. Everyone is present this evening. Item R, adjournment. Mr. Bonzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to adjourn. May I have a second? Mr. Geraci.
Second.
Second by Mr. Geraci. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
And we are adjourned. Thank you.